Okay, thank you all for attending this morning's planning meeting. Today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by way of the Council's intranet site. The images and sound recordings may also be used for training purposes within the Council. As you will see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed, to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. Proposed public speakers have been made aware of the broadcasting arrangements prior to this meeting. Would members please use their microphones to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off the microphone when you have finished. Members dialing in remotely, please turn on your camera for the duration of the committee and request by the Planning Department. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the committee and that any devices are on silent? Do we have any apologies?
Councillor John Jones.
Thank you. Declarations of interest? No. Okay. Minutes of the meeting previous on page 3 to 4. I'll hand this over to Andy.
Thanks, Chair. Members will recall that on the decision schedule last time there was an HMO application at Liscombe Street. Members were minded to grant delegated powers to the Head of Regeneration and Economic Development to grant the approval as per the officer recommendation, subject to a check by officers on site to confirm that all bedrooms met or exceeded the minimum licensing room standards. Officers have been out, checked that. They do, so the decision has been issued, approved under delegated powers. Thank you, Chair.
Moving on to the agenda. Sorry. Oh, sorry, I probably moved the minutes. Okay. Seconder?
I wanted to say on the minutes you've got John Reynolds as attending and absent. So can that be adjusted, please? Thank you.
Okay, so a seconder? Okay. Perkins? That's passed. Right. Oh, yeah. She proposed seconder. We've only got Councillor Perkins. Somebody else? Oh, sorry. Okay, Councillor Rheoli. That's that. Just passed. Moving on to the agenda. Application number 25/0266. This is 28 Bringlass Road, Newport, MP 205RZ, and this is in the Shaftesbury ward, and we have one speaker, which is the ward member, which is Councillor Cochrane. Oh, sorry, and the planning officer is Joanne Davidson, East Area Planning Manager. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just so members are aware, we've moved this one forward, so it doesn't appear on your agenda first. I think it's actually third. But this one I'll now present first. Okay, the application is for the change of use of a 3-bedroom residential property to a 5-bedroom house in multiple occupation, use class C4. A HMO is a house occupied by people who are usually unrelated and have private bedrooms but shared facilities such as kitchens, living areas and bathrooms. The application is before committee upon the request of Councillor Cochrane. The property is on the slide here, hatched blue. The property is currently vacant and undergoing renovation works. It is also noted that the application has changed during the course of consideration from a 6-bedroom HMO to the proposed 5-bedroom HMO. Members will note that some consultee responses refer to the original 6-bedroom proposal. The property is a mid-terrace dwelling house fronting Bringlass Road, which can be accessed via Malpas Road, marked on the aerial as the A4051. The arrow is pointing to the location of the site. It is situated in an urban residential area, which is characterised by rows of terrace dwellings but close to various commercial uses. The property is located approximately 100 metres from the northern edge of the Malpas Road district centre, which includes a variety of local services, including general store, food outlets, dentists, hairdressers and other services. The district centre is shaded red on this plan, and the application site is just off the north of the slide there. Public transport links, or bus stops, are closer still and located on Malpas Road, with the closest just next to the junction of Bringlass Road and Malpas Road, and an easy short walk from the site. The property is sustainably located, being within such close proximity to frequent bus services and close walking distance to local shops and services. The existing layout is typical of a dwelling, with a lounge, a dining room, kitchen and the only bathroom at ground floor on the left, with 3 bedrooms at first floor and shown on the right. The proposed plan provides a lounge, kitchen and shower room and 1 bedroom at ground floor and 4 bedrooms at first floor, along with a new second shower room. Okay, so just to further clarify that, at the moment the ground floor has an open plan dining lounge area, so that now will be closed up and we'll have a new bedroom at ground floor with the retained lounge. Upstairs we're going to get a second bathroom effectively, and the front bedroom, which is the largest, will be subdivided into 2. That's why we're getting that extra bedroom at first floor. The property has a spacious enclosed rear garden where it is proposed to site a bike store. Outbuildings and rear extensions are common in the rear garden areas of neighbouring properties. So what we're showing here on the left is the details of the bike store, which will go in the rear garden, and it's shown on the bottom right there on the block plan. And then the top aerial is showing the location of the site with the green dot, and just showing the presence of various extensions and outbuildings in the nearby properties. The property is shown on this recent site photo and is currently scaffolded. It is currently a house and will remain a house, and in this case 5 tenants are proposed. As a 3-bedroom dwelling, we can typically expect perhaps 3 or 4 occupants, possibly more, albeit these will normally be related. In a house in multiple occupation, or HMO, like a dwelling, the occupants are expected to live as a household, sharing facilities in the property. However, typically they will occupy with tenancy agreements or contracts per room or occupant. The personal details of occupants themselves is not a planning matter. Neither is the reputation, background, business, etc. of the landlord or owner. The local planning authority will and can only concern itself with land use planning considerations in the public interest, and consequently concerns for the identity of future HMO occupiers, the details of rental agreements and charges, the history and personal details of the landlord, and other similar matters will not ordinarily inform a planning application assessment and are not considered relevant to this case. Some of these matters are regulated by other parties. The main planning considerations on this application are the potential impacts of the change of use on parking provision and highway safety, as well as the impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area and neighbouring properties, the amenity of future occupiers, and flood risk. Impact on the character and amenity of the surrounding area and neighbouring properties can also include matters of social cohesion and fears of crime, albeit the weight that can be afforded to these considerations is dependent upon the fear of crime being objectively justified, the fear of crime having some reasonable basis, and the fear of crime relating to the proposed land use in planning terms rather than assumptions not supported by evidence as to the character of future occupiers. We know this from case law. So the proposal is within the urban area, it has a lawful residential use, and is located in a highly sustainable area. These factors accord with the principles set out in Strategic Policy SP1 of the adopted Local Development Plan. Policy H8 of the Local Development Plan relates specifically to self-contained accommodation and houses in multiple occupation, and says that HMOs will only be permitted if specified criteria are met. The full policy wording is set out at paragraph 7.4 of the assessment. The adopted HMO supplementary planning guidance, which must also be afforded substantial weight in decision-making, states that clusters of HMOs can alter the composition of a community and detract from local visual amenity. The guidance introduces a threshold above which HMOs are considered to detract from the character of the area. In general, the Council will not support a planning application that would take the number of HMOs considered as a proportion of the local housing stock above a specified limit. This site is located within the 10% threshold area. When taking a 50-metre radius from the address point of the application site, the full front elevations of 30 properties are caught. There are no existing registered HMOs within the 50-metre radius. Therefore, if the application were to proceed, the 10% threshold would not be exceeded. Consequently, HMO concentration levels are not grounds to refuse permission in this case. And as a point of clarity, the nearest HMO to this site is shown with a green square on this particular slide. So in terms of amenity considerations for any future occupiers of the HMO units, there is currently a communal living room which is currently used as part of an open plan living area, and it's shown in the right-hand picture with the area marked as a dining room on the existing plan. So these photos are the open plan dining lounge area, and as you can see, the previous owners and occupiers actually used the dining room as a sleeping area. A kitchen will be retained at ground floor, with the existing ground floor shower room retained and the A kitchen will be retained at ground floor with the existing ground floor shower room also retained. It's actually through the door at the end on that photo. Access to a rear garden is also provided to residents. No external alterations are proposed to the property, and no changes that may encourage this property to stand out or appear different to other residences in the street. Officers noted that the property was showing signs of wear and tear and need for maintenance or repair, notably to the front garden and boundary treatment compared to its nearest neighbours, but it is currently undergoing extensive refurbishment under the current ownership. The HMO standards state that a single bedroom should be at least 6.51 square metres. Shared kitchens and living rooms for up to 5 people should be 7 square metres and 10 square metres respectively. All bedrooms and living spaces have been measured by officers on site and exceed the requirements. The ground floor bedroom was last used as a sleeping area, as shown on the previous slide. And these photos show the first floor rooms, with the room on the right proposed to be subdivided to create 2 bedrooms and include the new shower room. The photos on the left are the same room, just taken at each end. These photos show the last bedroom at first floor and the hallway leading between the front door and the kitchen. In this case, the kitchen and proposed lounge are well above the SPG minimum standards, and all rooms contain windows providing adequate light and ventilation for occupiers, with access to a good-sized rear garden, and all of this weighs in its favour. The accommodation would provide an acceptable standard of amenity for occupiers. In relation to parking and highway matters, the existing dwelling has 3 bedrooms, and this generates a parking demand of 3 spaces using our SPG. There is no parking on the site. The 5-bedroom HMO would require 1 space per bedroom, a total of 5 spaces, and a visitor space, and therefore results in an increase in parking demand against our adopted parking SPG. However, we know that certain factors must be afforded substantial weight when assessing parking impacts, notably whether or not the site is sustainable. In this case, it is. A parking survey supporting the application also confirms that on-road parking is available to meet the uplift in parking expectations stated in the SPG, but there are high parking stresses in the immediate locality. The Council's highway officer raises an objection on parking grounds, as the parking survey confirms that the area is experiencing high parking stress, and the highways officer considers that there is no practical capacity for more parking, and many neighbour consultation responses and the local councillor comments share this view. Now, this slide shows the survey undertaken and provided as supporting information to this application. Parking is clearly in high demand at times of survey, with 112 of the 117 available parking spaces in the area surveyed occupied. This is evidence of high parking demand and near saturation of on-road parking at the time of the survey. Officers have previously tested a refusal of planning permission on parking grounds on a case where the parking survey provided to the local planning authority had confirmed very high parking stress compatible with this survey, and where parking within 200 metres of the appeal site was near or at capacity. This case is referred to in the officer assessment as 23 Arundel Road. This was also a change of use from a dwelling to a 5-bedroom HMO. The primary objection was impact upon parking and highway safety. It also had no off-road parking. Since that appeal decision in November 2022, there has been no change in the parking SPG or local development planning policies, and no planning appeals based on parking-related reasons for refusal on HMOs have been won by the Council. Officers have considered the objections received in relation to parking in this case and the assessment of this factor by inspectors at HMO planning appeals in Newport generally. We know that the Parking Standards SPG sets out how the Council will apply the standards, taking into account the previous use of the site, as well as a range of locational factors. The Council's parking requirement for the appeal proposal at Arundel Road and this proposal would be 6 spaces, 1 space per unit, plus a visitor space. The existing dwellings in both cases have 3 bedrooms, generating a parking demand of 3 spaces, meaning a parking shortfall of 3 spaces, which cannot be provided off-street. The Parking Standards SPG is guidance, supplementary planning guidance, that is not intended to be rigidly applied. It refers to consideration of the merits of the scheme, the sustainability of the location, and local circumstances when applying the standards. Planning Policy Wales states that parking provision should be informed by the local context, including accessibility to public transport and the objective of reducing reliance on the private car, which will support a modal shift to walking, cycling and public transport. Planning authorities must support schemes which keep parking levels down and should apply parking standards flexibly. This site is in a highly sustainable location close to a major arterial route that is well served by bus. There are local shops and services, as previously mentioned, nearby. And the site is also within walking distance, easy walking distance of Malpas Road District Centre. It is therefore a location where walking and cycling would be a realistic alternative to the car. The location and the type of accommodation proposed mean that the proposal is likely to be attractive to those without a car, but there is of course no guarantee that occupants would not have a car. The proposal provides for cycle storage facilities to the rear, which would support a modal shift away from cars, as advocated in Planning Policy Wales, albeit the constraints of the stepped front access are noted, but no different to the existing situation. There remains the possibility that some residents of the proposed development may have cars, and the implications of the potential increased parking demand must be assessed. The parking survey is of the streets within 200 metres of the site. This was carried out at night when there would be peak occupancy of spaces, using a recognised methodology approved by the Council, and the Council's Highway Officer raises no objection to how the survey has been undertaken. The survey shows a high demand for parking in the area, with an overall parking stress of 95 or 96%, which equates to 5 or 6 free spaces out of the 117 potentially available. These results are also supported by information from the local councillor and local residents, who refer to there being no available spaces on local streets, and sometimes a need to park on nearby streets rather than closer to their properties. The free spaces noted in the parking survey were mainly on Bringlass Road. Weekday evening site visit by officers confirm the parking survey to be realistic, with some spaces available at the time of site visit, and there are clear similarities between the circumstances of the current proposal and the appeal decision at Arundel Road, with comparable parking stress in both cases. That said, each case must be decided on its own merits, as you know, in the context of the circumstances that apply to that site. Residents refer to congestion and problems caused by illegal parking. It may be that some people park inconsiderately or even illegally. That is regrettable, of course, but there are relevant laws and restrictions available to control illegal parking, and planning decisions can only reasonably be based on the premise that such laws and restrictions will be appropriately enforced. This is an existing situation and not unique to this proposal. So during a recent weekday morning officer site visit, there were numerous available on-road parking spaces close to the application site, despite any pressure arising from visitors to the district centre parking in neighbouring streets. On a recent weekday late evening site visit, there were several empty spaces along Bringlass Road observed. So this is Bringlass Road. This is a recent photo taken by officers showing available on-road spaces. Again, looking at Bringlass Road, showing availability of on-road spaces, and just a little bit, just panning around a little more to show availability of on-road spaces on Bringlass Road. That's a weekday officer site visit at 10 a.m. Councillor Cochrane has referred to additional traffic associated with the temporary relocation of Millbrook School. This relocation excludes its nursery but is otherwise the entire school. The pupils linked to this temporary relocation are taken by bus to and from the Bringlass House site from the Millbrook site. Sorry, I didn't show you that's an evening shot, again showing availability of on-road spaces on Bringlass Road. This photo is taken at 8:30 p.m. Okay. So in relation to the Millbrook School relocation and increase in traffic along Bringlass Road, apologies, this is not a great scale, but I did it to try and show the distances involved. So in relation to the relocation of the school, coaches have to line up on the road above the entrance to the school. So the relocation of Millbrook School and an existing school, Bro Tyneham, are shown with red dots on this aerial, and we've got the application site shown as a green dot. We do understand that it can get quite busy, probably for around 20 or 30 minutes at the drop-off and pick-up in relation to the school traffic. However, such traffic peaks in areas of schools is not uncommon at all and will often occur when on-road residential parking is not at its peak. Furthermore, the schools are over 850 metres north of the application site, as you can see on the aerial, and it can reasonably be expected that any peaks in parking linked to operation of the schools is likely to be focused well away from the application site itself. So to conclude on the parking issue, on-street parking within 200 metres of the site is shown to be at near capacity as confirmed by the applicant's parking survey. This demand means that people have to potentially park further away from their homes on occasion. We know from the Arundel Road and other appeal decision cases that where the public highway is entirely relied upon for residential parking in densely populated areas, an inability to park outside your home is not unusual, particularly where car ownership has increased over time, so on-street parking is now a matter of some inconvenience owing to competition. We know that the Planning Authority must give considerable weight to the sustainability of the development in this location, and officer site visits during daytime and late evening have shown on-road parking spaces to be available. The type of accommodation in this location is likely to be attractive to those without a car, but this is not guaranteed. The rigid application of parking standards is not appropriate in the circumstances of this case, and consequently officers recommend that the proposal would not give rise to robust or significant concerns regarding highway or pedestrian safety. There may be issues relating to matters of convenience, but these are not sufficient to warrant refusal of the proposal in officer view. This view is compatible with previous recent appeal decisions on the issue, including the case at Arundel Road. Committee can, of course, take a different view on this. In relation to cycle parking, this is the same as existing in that anyone with a bicycle will need to store it in the property or the back garden, thereby wheeling it through the property. This is the existing situation and doesn't change. In terms of flood risk considerations, the planning application proposes highly vulnerable development as a change of use of existing highly vulnerable residential property into 5-bed HMO. A ground floor bedroom is added. The property is not within a flood risk zone, but is adjacent to one. The fact the property is located outside a risk zone on the most up-to-date flood maps, and as the building is elevated above pavement level, Natural Resources Wales offers no objection to the proposals, and the proposals are considered to comply with TAN 15 and Policy SP3 of the Council's development plan. In relation to waste, the property has a front forecourt, so it's the property on the left of this slide. It's elevated above the pavement level, and like neighbouring properties, appears to rely on a wheelie bin being kept in this area. The property shows the application site, as I said, on the left, with the bin stored next to the bay window, and shows that other properties nearby store in wheelie bins in a similar way. This is the way in which waste would be stored as a dwelling, and their use as a HMO would not stand out in this respect. Given the size of the HMO, having 5 bedrooms and 5 occupants, the number of waste receptacles are no different to the use as a 3-bedroom house, but the property may be eligible for a larger general waste bin of 180 litres instead of the 120 litres standard to help manage general waste. And we know that the neighbouring properties generally store waste receptacles on the front steps or close to front doors and sometimes on the pavement. And on the whole, there is evidence of neat storage of bins and boxes to the front of each property. 4 steps are present between the pavement and the front door, with space to the side of the door alcove and next to the bay window to store a bin. Properties with more challenging levels nearby appear to find space to store bins off the pavement, and this appears to be a realistic prospect in practice. But the presence of bins in front forecourts or on front steps and sometimes on the pavement is commonplace here and will not appear incongruous. To sum up, the change of use would not result in an exceedance of the threshold set out in the Council's guidance, and it is considered that the proposals would not result in a demonstrable impact to the character of the area. The proposals would potentially increase demand for parking when assessed against the Council's adopted parking SPG. This may lead to added inconvenience, and the highway officer has objected to this scheme. The site is located within a highly sustainable location, within close proximity to shops and services, with good transport links, and we know this must be given substantial weight. As such, officers consider that the proposals would not result in an adverse impact to highway safety or neighbouring amenity. The proposals are acceptable having regard to flood risk matters, and it is recommended to members that the application is granted, subject to the stated conditions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Cochran. Oh, just, can you wait till...
Could I just make, I want to, because Joanne made a comment of Millbrook School is actually on the site. I thought I'd bring
Can we just speak? You've got 2 minutes.
I'm chair of governors. I'm not quite sure if it's a contract of interest with you or not. I don't know. Because you mentioned Millbrook Schools at the top of Bringlass, and I'm the chair of governors, but I'm an open mind, so.
It doesn't seem related to the actual application property, and as you're viewing everything and taking everything with an open mind, then it seems fine.
Councillor Cochran.
Thank you, Chair. 28 Bringlass Road. I'm not naive to the problems of housing at the moment. Clearly, there are issues about housing. What I am concerned about is the way we're looking at HMOs as the panacea to sort all our housing problems out. Clearly, the major things that I've got in this area is the waste, and I think the other major one is the parking. Because some of the photographs you showed there, clearly at 10 o'clock in the morning is not the same as 5 o'clock, 5:30, and 6 o'clock at night, where you cannot park anywhere near there. A lot of them are going into Redland Street, going into Bringlass Road. You've got a garage that uses all his lorries along there at night. The night photograph you showed there along the bridge, well, it's a walkway. There's yellow lines going all along there, so people can't park there anyway. So that photograph was a misinterpretation of what's happening there. So parking is a real issue. Although when I talk to a lot of the residents, most of the issues I have on Bringlass at the moment and Redland Street is parking. In fact, I'm meeting the Highways Cabinet member tomorrow at the bottom of Redland Street because of the parking there. It's a real issue now, parking, and I'm sure it's a real issue in a lot of areas. And I think this is only going to add to that particular problem. Now, when I suppose I've got to be grateful in some respects it's not 6 as opposed to 5. It's going to be 5 rather than 6, rather. So really, that's a move in the right direction. What I can't accept that the parking is, because even got highways objecting to that. Even highways can see that the problem, and the yellow lines are all round there now, people can't park. People are parking right at the top of Bringlass Road now. People are parking in Redland Street, in the Avenue, and it's causing problems there. So they're saying they can't park now because people there. When you say there's 50 metres, as opposed to, the guidelines that, there's no HMOs in that. Well, you've got a lot of Airbnbs in the Crescent. You've got 3, and a lot of people got these long vans now because a lot of them are contractors. So they're taking the spaces of 2 cars up. It's a real nightmare, and I sympathise with a lot of members in their other areas, but I'm just saying, right clearly now, on the parking issue is a real issue, and I think this is only going to exacerbate the issue we've got. I know a lot of members, a lot of residents rather, we've got 39 of them who have objected. Some of the comments I can't accept what they've said, but in general terms, they are very frustrated about what's happening now, and they see in this as something a step too far. When we talk about waste, it's interesting when you say that the normal bin size for a 3-bedroom house is 120-litre bin. If we go to 5, you're only going to give us 180 litre. If you divide that, so someone on a 120-litre bin, that's about 60 litres per person, isn't it? 3. If it goes to 5, you're reducing that to 36 litres per person. So if you think about that if all those people use that side of equation, you're reducing the litre per person in those houses. I think the other issue I have with HMOs is who is going to be the lead person? Who is going to put the bins out? Who is going to look after the toilets? Who is going to clean the bath after them? Who's going to clean the kitchen? I think it's a recipe for disaster, HMOs, to be honest. I just don't think it's very easy for 5 individuals to live together in such a small environment. I'm asking, taking all the objections that the people have said, and I don't want to go through all the objections because they're all there, what the people have said. I'm asking members here today to reject this application. It's not an appropriate place to do it. Parking is a real issue in that area and all around there, Bringlass, Redland Street, the Avenue, the Crescent, parking Aston Crescent. You just can't park there at night. And now you possibly can have 5 or more cars coming into that area. So I'm asking members really to reject this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I open the floor to members, please, if you'd like to make your comments? Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. I picked up the same as Councillor Cochrane did. Are we on? Yes. In regards to the parking issue, the slides which was actually shown on a number of them, it showed them double yellow lines in every place. So at the end of the day, I think that gives a false impression of the amount of parking which is available. The other thing, Chair, in regards to flooding, according to national policy, flooding risk is going to get increased on a bigger scale than what it is at the moment. And as this is adjacent to a flooding risk area, I am concerned of what we're doing at the moment if we grant this particular application, because in the past we have granted applications, a few years ago, which weren't on a flood risk plane, but now are on a flood risk plane, and we're still building new houses on those flood risk planes. And I am concerned that if we grant applications like this, in the future, they will become on a flood risk plane or a flood risk, either from sea or other means. And I am really concerned about that. The other thing is, in regards to waste, it has happened in the past and it is happening at the moment, where waste receptacles are not kept within the curtilage of the building. On that photograph which the office has shown, adjacent houses have got them adjacent to the windows and the bay windows by the front door, but one of the properties still had the wheelie bin on the road, or on the pavement, on the footpath. So I am concerned about, they're little things, I know, but are we doing the right thing by granting applications like this without further restrictions being put in place? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jordan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Joanne, can you bring back the diagram, please, of the layout of the property as well? Because you're saying on there that the rooms are adequate for the size of the properties and everything else, but there's no dimensions on there to show us as a committee of what dimensions of the rooms are and what sort of, where you're going to split the one bedroom into two. It doesn't give us a good, clear image of the size of the room itself. Also, I totally agree with Councillor Cochrane. The exaggeration area of that area is massive and really, really bad. I'm a taxi driver, and I'm finding myself difficult to even get around some of the streets, really, where there's overpopulated with cars as well. Also, there's another part I did mention. If I could just bring them up there first and speak to that one first, if possible.
Okay, Chair. Let's go through a couple of these, bearing in mind the points that have been raised. So this photo is taken by officers, just picking up the double yellow line point. So this was actually taken only a few days ago, at 10 a.m. in the morning, and showing on-road parking with availability with no double yellow lines. So I think, Councillor Jordan, this is what you wanted to see. Yeah. So bearing in mind the discussion that happened at the last planning committee, when we're assessing room sizes, we will generally go off the proposed plans that we're given. But if you recall at last committee, members had a discussion about how accurate, or can we rely on the accuracy of proposed layout drawings. So as officers now, what we're doing as standard on this type of application is we're taking a tape measure on site with us and physically measuring the rooms. If the plans are shown to be inaccurate, we go back to the agent before it comes before you to get them corrected. So on this one, there are some internal adjustments being made to the property. Downstairs, easily measured, well exceeds licensing requirements in terms of minimum room sizes. Upstairs, we've got some subdivision going on, but it's fairly logical in the sense that it goes down the middle of the front bay. Officers have taken a tape measure to it, having regard to the subdivision that's going on. The lowest, it is in your report, but I think it's 6.65 square metres, the smallest room. I'm not going to claim that that's a wealth of space, but we are comparing it against the licensing standards, which is 6.51 square metres minimum. It's the one at the upstairs on the front left. Yeah. As you're looking at it, yeah. So it's really difficult. I appreciate that for you as members looking at the photographs, which is why we do, we're trying to show you in photographic form what these are like, but it's difficult to get a true sense of space. On the ground floor proposed bedroom, for reasons unknown, the previous owner was actually using it as a sleeping area, so you can sort of see there's a bed, there's a set of drawers, etc. in there, which makes it easier for you to judge the size. Upstairs is more difficult because there's nothing there, and it's being changed. So I do understand, but we have physically measured it, which was a key issue at the last planning committee. We have physically measured this before we've brought it to you today to confirm the sizes.
Yeah. It's not so we don't trust you at all, but it's just like to see if we've seen the figures in front of us. We can make our own assumptions then as well of what the sizes are. But we're guided by what the officer says, everything else. But by seeing the size of the rooms and the dimensions of the rooms at the committee meetings, we can see the size themselves.
Yeah.
We're only going by what you say is right and what's not. So that's where I'm coming from as well. You might be correct when we say, but we're not seeing it ourselves on paper form as well.
It's correct in that we've double checked it. We're not just going from the plan. We've been out and we've measured it. So even with a margin of error, they're still above the 6.51 square metre minimum requirement. So I'm not sure what else we can do on that point in terms of satisfying the committee in terms of what it's seeing.
Also, as well as on another slide you had where the parking, you took out Aston Crescent and something else, and Charleston Road. There's not a Charleston Road in Newport that I've ever known about anyway. There must be a typo error on that then, because Charleston Road is, I've never known a Charleston Road. I know Charleston Place, which Councillor Cochrane has put on it.
Yeah, this slide is actually taken directly from the applicant's own parking survey, and there was discussion during the consideration process between them and the highways officer at Newport. You'll sort of get that impression from the highway officer comments. So this is the final parking survey results, as adjusted, as requested by the highway officer. And there's no denying that it shows high parking stress. The survey is in accordance with the methodology that is agreeable to us as a council, and was taken in the early-ish hours, 5 a.m, when we would expect peak parking demand.
But like you said, and Councillor Cochrane said, by just those 2 mornings, like in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning, that's irrelevant to me. What about weekends? The parking survey just seems to be in a weekday, not a weekend where you might find there's a lot more people who actually be home at the weekends. If they're working away, you'll find there might not be much parking there, but weekends you should find a parking restrictions quite bad really at the weekends. I think they should do a weekend parking survey as well, I think, really.
Noted, but as I've said, the highways officer has no objection to the methodology used on the parking survey. As I said, they've told us that there is high parking demand. The parking survey is telling us there is high parking demand in this area.
Sorry, Chair. The other thing is, where they've got the objections, as quite a lot of people have actually objected. What sort of ratio do you look at then for given weight of like 39 objections where you've said there like 60 letters, so the 60 applicants or residents, you've had well over 50% of those come back as being given objections. So what sort of weight do you give that then for them? Because what do you give weight for against those residents who've actually put the objections in?
Our recommendation is not based on how many objections or how many letters of support we receive. So we will give weight according to the material planning considerations raised in the objections or letters of support? We've got a leak. Yeah. Okay, I'll carry on. I've forgotten where I was, but essentially, even if we have 1,000 letters of objection, it doesn't automatically mean that we'll recommend refusal to you. We have to do our own professional judgment, consider obviously the development plan, supplementary planning guidance, all the things you're aware of that we consider and tell you about. So the mere fact we have objections is not reason to refuse planning permission. And hopefully, as part of my assessment, I've explained to you that we know from the objections we have received in relation to parking, it mirrors what the parking survey the applicant has given us is telling us. It mirrors what the highway officer is telling us. But we are advising you that there's a bigger picture from a planning perspective. We know this from the many times we've gone to appeal on similar issues. We know that if the HMO is located in a highly sustainable location, which this is, which hopefully I've explained in my presentation why, we know that inspectors will give that substantial weight even when faced with supporting information telling them that there is very limited parking supply close to the property. We've said this before, that HMOs are often considered to be likely to have a lower parking expectation, particularly where the future occupants know that they can easily walk to a bus stop or easily walk to a local service. So we try and give you our balanced judgment, because we balance the objections, we balance the merits, and we advise you on where we think the balance lies. But you, as a planning committee, may take a different balanced view. That is up to you, because it's before you for determination.
Councillor Pym.
Thank you, Chair. We're seeing more and more of these HMO applications in traditional family residential areas. This is my first sitting with planning, so forgive me if I'm asking a few questions that I'm not supposed to. But have we got any information on who the neighbours are either side of the property? Are we allowed to discuss that as a no? So taking that aside, I personally think 5 bedrooms, 5 adults in a 2-storey mid-terraced house is grossly inadequate. There's not enough space there for 5 adults to live. In most family settings, the family would work together with cooking, cleaning, general household tasks. There is a potential that the 5 adults who would be living in this property would live independently. They would cook for themselves, they would clean what they need to, and the setup in the house would mean that things are not done in any logical order, no pre-planning taking place, which, as you'll see in other HMOs in built-up areas, leads to a lot of mess, leads to a lot of disruption. We've seen one picture that was quickly scanned past of the current state of the garden. So the current state of the garden, you would I would describe as scruffy. I would be amazed if the people who would be living in this property would be working together to clean that garden up and use that garden. And from my personal experience of HMOs, the back gardens and the front gardens are usually left in pretty poor condition until the landlord pays somebody to clean them up. So I think that this property is not suitable, or this HMO application is not suitable for the area. We've already discussed the parking issues, the waste issues, but also you've got the potential of 5 adults living in a house that is nowhere near big enough for 5 adults to be living in, and so I'm personally opposed to the application, and I'm disappointed that the person putting the application forward has pitched it for 5 bedrooms. I think that is completely unworkable in a property this size.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rheoli, your hand is up. I can see other hands up as well, so Councillor Rheoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to overgo what's already been said. We have to deal with the planning law as we see it now. And I agree with the planning officers to an extent that the planning law is only an interpretation, their interpretation. I think this application fails to meet the planning requirements, our planning requirements related to traffic and parking. And its approval would likely exacerbate existing problems, making it a poor choice on planning grounds. So if you were to abandon your own planning criteria, you are making a poor choice that's going to exacerbate an already oversubscribed situation. You're going to increase the risk of road safety. This is a typical reason as to why this has to be given greater weight than anything else. The fact that a previous planning application has been agreed where by an inspector, maybe that inspector got it wrong and we got it right. I don't think we should be guided by the mistakes of others in the past. This fails to meet the planning requirements related to traffic and parking. It doesn't meet the requirements, and that is a planning ground for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Harvey, your hand's up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's pretty much along the same lines everyone else has said. I am concerned about the parking. I think the photographs were misleading. I think in future, if photographs are taken, you should have a point of reference. So what's taken at 5 PM should be taken at the same time at night from the same point. My concerns are the size of the rooms again. You did state that one of the rooms was 6.5 metres, not 6.51 metres. And from the photographs you showed, it's taken from a piece of tape on the floor. I think these rooms should be measured after they've been installed. Because once you put a stud wall in, plus plasterboard and plastering and everything else, that room's going to shrink. So you can't go off a bit of tape on the floor and expect us to take that as read, because what I'm reading here is existing measurements of the room sizes are not attached. So it would just, I know you've been there, I'm not discrediting you and saying you've measured with a tape measure, but there's nothing stopping that gentleman or landlord, once you've left, moving that bit of tape one side or another. It's to me, to measure up a bit of tape on the floor is ridiculous. That you should have gone, wait until the walls were built, or said, put your stud wall in, then we'll take our measurements. Because the room sizes it's really concerning me. That's as much as I have to say. I'm not against. I'm against this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay.
I'm thinking about it. You carry.
probably going to make some similar points. You just as well address them together, I guess. It's helpful to be provided with the room sizes around licensing requirements, as a couple of councillors have referred to. I think Councillor Harvey makes a really good point that you know, the thickness of the stud wall is pertinent to that, because that will require significant insulation for building to deal with the sound issues in a HMO, which are requirements of our own sort of HMO planning guidance in any event. So, yeah, I think that is a point well made, and one that we ought to cast our minds to. But in terms of room sizes in particular, I think I wasn't here at the last planning committee, unfortunately, and it is really important to think about room sizes. But they aren't the be-all and end-all, because our decision in planning is not licensing, it's planning. I've been told that quite clearly by the legal officer recently in a couple of discussions I've had, and we've been told it several times by yourselves here. And the question for us on the planning committee is adequate amenity, in my view. And this house doesn't have adequate amenity for the number of occupiers that are there, in my view. So, whilst those properties are on the cusp of the minimum roof sizes for licensing, they incorporate alcoves and L shapes and stuff. So the amenity space is how you're going to use it, and you've got to get a bed in there and a wardrobe and a chest of drawers at a minimum in a bedroom. And some of those spaces with those little alcoves are just unworkable as an amenity space for the number of occupiers in there. Secondly, our planning guidance policy says that we wouldn't normally or we would expect rooms to be arranged and designed in a manner that maximising the living standards of occupants, which I think it doesn't for the point I just made. But secondly, it says living rooms should not be next to, directly above or directly below a bedroom in a neighbouring property. And I think that bedroom on the ground floor will be directly below living spaces in a property. So I think that's something that we've got to consider, the impact on the neighbours as well. In terms of the adequate amenity, I support all my colleagues' comments around parking. You know, whilst there's been a previous inspector decision in 2022, as we know, those inspector decisions are not binding on future decisions. We make each decision based on the merits of each case, and whilst they might be persuasive in the way a particular inspector might approach a case, other inspectors approach cases and take different views on the matters. And I think that our Highways Department have been clear that they cannot support the application, and we as officers should support that decision and not go against their recommendations. So for me, I would look to refuse based on those grounds. But in the main, because the property doesn't provide sufficient amenity for the occupiers proposed to live there, there are two very, very small shower rooms for 5 adults in that building. There's not a bath in there. There are two. One is directly off a kitchen, which is, you know, particularly ill-advised. And whilst they've tried to create a corridor there to separate that space, to have somebody showering and using the toilet while another 4 people are trying to cook in a kitchen just isn't acceptable to me. And so I would recommend refusal on those grounds.
Can I just clarify? I believe licensing and regulations do take account of the alcoves when they measure the size amenity for the room. I believe that's in our guidance as well. They've got to take note of that when measuring the room size. So I just want to put that out there.
They are included in the calculation. The question for us is not the room size. The question is adequate amenity space for the occupiers. And so what I'm saying is, whilst they might be included in the floor plan calculation, if you can't use them sufficiently because they're in a bay window and in a small alcove where you can't get a bed or a chest of drawers or a wardrobe or whatever, that isn't sufficient amenity for somebody to live properly in a building.
Just a sec, see if John come back.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Just so I'm clear about the adequacy of amenity point that you're making with the reference to alcoves and things like that. Am I right in thinking that you're, in terms of bedrooms, it's the front two upstairs bedrooms? Okay. You've also mentioned that you consider the shower rooms insufficient, assumedly in their size. Obviously, the ground floor shower room is existing. It's the only bathroom serving the three-bedroom property. So the added shower room at first floor was seen as something of a positive. Had we only been reliant on that back ground floor one for 5 bedrooms, we would have raised issue with that. Okay, I just wanted to be clear about that. So the other bedrooms shown on the proposed, shall I put, let's bring it up a sec. Sorry, I was just conscious I was looking at it on my screen, but you haven't got it on yours. So the other bedrooms, so the one at the back first floor, sorry, the two at the back first floor and the one at ground floor, you're not suggesting there's issues with those necessarily in terms of the amenity point? Right.
It's difficult to tell on a floor plan without the sort of measurements. They appear to be sufficient to get sufficient furniture in. The one photo that you showed of the one upstairs room showed a double bed in there and a bedroom. I know it will be shortened because they're creating that shower in the middle, that shower room in the middle, I think, so it will be shortened slightly, unless it's the very back one. I don't think it is. But they appear to be okay. It's the two small ones that just don't appear to be able to use. And I note the original proposal, they were trying to split that into 3. And I think that was the tape that was on the floor, which you could clearly see that was never workable. From the picture you showed of the tape on the floor, that was where they were trying to put the extra window in and create the 3 along there. So it was hard to tell, and I took sort of Councillor Harvey's point that he probably assumed the tape was where you measured from, which I don't think it was, because that was the original proposal. But it is the front two anyway.
I should have made that point on the photos. The photos were showing the 6-bed HMO layout, and we as officers raised that early on as being an acceptable arrangement for the reasons you've set out. But obviously as officers we felt that the reduction to 5 and the layout as it is shown now was acceptable in amenity terms. But I wanted to clarify that because this isn't going to be the last HMO committee is going to be seeing, and we need to understand as officers the key, the way you're thinking about these things. But so thank you for that.
I don't believe. Oh, Councillor, you want to? Watkins, come back.
Sorry, Chair. It's something which has come to light that I read here in regards to outside amenity space. What is there on this particular application?
It's got the front elevated forecourt, obviously, but the main amenity space is out the back. So that's a photo taken by officers. So noting Councillor Pym's point, the condition of the property, nothing to do with the applicant, I should say. So the condition of the property, as I mentioned in the presentation, it is in need of some investment, refurbishment. I don't know how long it's been vacant, but it is showing signs that it is in need of improvement. And obviously the applicant, in this case, now owns it, and that scaffold, which is indicative of works being undertaken to the property, is a recent development. But the amenity space is primarily this rear garden. It's quite long, it's tiered. I appreciate it looks a little bit messy, as Councillor, or scruffy, as Councillor Pym suggested at present. That is the existing situation.
So officers are happy with the amenity space outside, providing it's maintained and looked after?
Yeah, okay. The size is fine. Yeah.
Thank you, Joanne.
No problems.
Councillor Pym, come back.
As the planning committee, are we allowed to request information on if this is the only HMO application or only HMO that the owner, the landlord, has within Newport?
So as part of my presentation, as I mentioned, the reputation, the portfolio, etc. of the applicant is not a matter for us. It is something that licensing has some regard to, but it's not a planning issue. All we're interested in is the land use planning considerations. There are other regulatory parties in the council that will look at those sorts of factors, and specifically HMO licensing, which is part of the Environmental Health Service.
Okay.
Thank you. I think that concludes all the questions now to officers. Could we make somebody propose? Recommendations? Those for approval? Yeah. Yeah. Is there a proposer for the officer's recommendation to grant the application? No. No. All those against the officer's recommendations to... Sorry. Oh, so that's it then. Okay, we have a proposer for refusal of the officer's recommendation.
I'm quite happy, Chair, to propose refusal, but based on highways grounds. For me, as I said earlier on, Chair, is the application fails to meet the planning requirements related to traffic and parking, and its approval would have likely exacerbated the existing property, making it a poor choice on planning grounds. So on planning grounds, I'm against it on highways related matters.
So that's Councillor Rheoli. A seconder? Okay, we'll pick up on these now. Councillor Pym, second that. Okay, so we've got all the claims for the refusal. So parking and amenity.
Chair, I think it would be sensible if we came up with an approved list of reasons between us and one proposal. It's clear we're all on the same page.
Yes.
So, rather than try and vote on one proposal and somebody adds something in, I think if we can get a consensus about what the reasons are, if Sean's happy, then we should proceed on that basis and propose and second it.
We've got the parking issues.
Yeah, I suppose it's over to members now. I suppose we've had Councillor Rheoli who made a motion to refuse for one reason. Councillor Perkins has suggested a second reason. It's whether members want to debate any additional reasons. There's been a lot of debate about various things. From an officer perspective, we've been clear why we think the proposal is accepted. Members don't agree with that. So you will need to provide reasons that can be substantiated and defended on appeal. So, as I said, we're not at risk of being cost awarded against us for being unreasonable, effectively. So if members want to discuss where they think they want to sit and then someone propose a recommendation would be my suggestion.
I'd just like to add a third reason on. So there's the two reasons. There's the parking reason, there's the amenity considerations, which I referred to earlier. The third one is that there's insufficient detail provided by the applicant to reduce the transmission of sound between floors, ceilings and adjoining rooms of properties by means of acoustic insulation, and no planning condition for that.
That would be picked up by building regs and license.
Well, yeah, I don't actually think it would be building regs because it's under 6 people, but it would be a licensing issue. As I said, from a planning perspective, do we have evidence that having a bedroom, which appears to be a bedroom at present, next to a habitable room, we get them above, below, to the side, is going to cause demonstrable harm to the next door neighbour? If you were to do that, as I said, we've got no objection from environmental health on that respect. I think that would be a very tough ground to defend myself. That's my advice to you.
Chairman, I think the only realistic one we have is as we said, on the parking requirements. It doesn't meet our own parking standards, and I know the officers have given advice on mitigation based upon a previous decision. We have supported this committee, and that decision, if it was to go ahead, is supported by Highways. And so the realistic one is the parking one for turning this application down at this moment in time.
Yeah, Councillor, it's just to be aware that if this decision is appealed, it would go to PEDU. This wouldn't be a decision for us. So if PEDU consider that one issue to be fine, that would be it. They might allow permission for that reason. If members have got concerns about other reasons, we can't guarantee that they would come back in and then look to refuse for different reasons in the future. It's just to make you aware, as I said, for members to decide what reasons they think this is unacceptable for and what they think we as a council can defend. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. That's very wise. Thank you.
Withdraw the amenities. So we're basically going up on the refusal with regards to Highways issues and lack of. So you still want the amenity as well?
So just to be clear, I think I am with regards to the first reason. It's, as I said, the proposal results in an increase in on-demand for car parking that can't be accommodated on street. That would result effectively, exacerbate highway issues to the detriment of highway safety. So that's what my view of reason number one is, in brief. The second reason is in relation to the 2 front bedrooms. Given their configuration and whilst they meet the licensing standards, the overall amenity provided because of the configuration of the bedrooms is detrimental to the residential amenity of future occupiers of those 2 bedrooms. That's all we're going for in terms of amenity. That's my view. If that's what's being proposed, then I said it would be worth moving, seconding, voting.
Happy to move those as you laid out.
Right. So that's a sole pass.
Yeah.
We've got a seconder, which is Councillor Pym. No, sorry. Yeah, all those that vote now, please raise your hands. Yeah. In favour of the refusal. Yeah. So that's unanimous then. And myself. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for that.
Chair.
Okay,
make a point. I need to leave for 12:30. Is that okay? Yeah, 12:30. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, quickly this goes and then have to leave. Okay, moving on to the item number 2, application number 250471. This is for the site of 10 to 11 Port Road. What's number 2?
Yeah, sorry, we're going to go to this one now.
What's that one?
Because Councillor Thomas is here. So now it's 3.
Oh, that was set. Oh, so we're going to this one now.
Take this off again.
Right, okay.
Which one?
Yeah.
Well,
Does-
we get you to come.
Does anybody else want to a comfort break? 5 minutes? No?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Right. So.
Right. We're all having a comfort break for 5 minutes and return. We're all happy now to carry on, so we'll go on to next item on the agenda, which is 240678. This is the application for Monbank Development Site, Cardiff Road, Newport. We have one speaker, which is the ward member, which is Councillor Kate Thomas, and the presenting officer on this application is Adam Foote, the Principal Planning Officer. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. This application is being reported to Planning Committee for consideration as it meets the definition of major development as defined by the Town and Country Planning Development Management Procedure Order. The application site comprises of 2 parcels of land separated by a section of adopted highway linking the B4237 with the residential development known as Monbank, located to the east and south. The site is located within the defined urban boundary, and the immediate adjacent built form comprises of residential development. Both parcels of land are irregularly shaped. The smaller parcel to the south, which we'll refer to as Plot 2, is at a lower level than the separating road, however has a generally level topography across the site. The larger parcel to the north, which we will refer to as Site 1, has a generally level topography, however the land level sharply declines towards the cycle track that runs along the boundary of the site, separating it from the railway line that runs to the north and west of the site. So the southern parcel of land has most recently been used by Network Rail as storage area and railway sidings, although it has started to slowly revegetate with self-seeding plants. It's generally open and consisting of hard standing. The northern parcel consists of a grassed area with a small number of young trees located within the site. So this application is seeking consent for the development of 42 dwellings, landscape planting and associated works. All residential units are proposed to be affordable housing in accordance with the definition of Technical Advice Note 2, and the development is proposed as 2 stories with a typical residential design and appearance. Parking provision is proposed with 1 off-street parking space per unit and visitor parking spaces provided throughout the site. The southern and smaller parcel of land is proposed to accommodate 12 residential units of accommodation consisting of 4 dwelling houses arranged as 2 sets of semi-detached properties and 8 flats arranged as 2 blocks, each with 4 flats. However, each block is designed to appear as a pair of semi-detached dwellings. Access is proposed to be gained via the existing access point that is located centrally on Capel Hall Road, with the residential unit set back in the plot facing towards the previously completed Monbank development. The internal highway parking areas of open space and landscaping would separate the houses from Capel Road. The northern parcel, or Site 2, Site 1, so apologies, would accommodate the remaining 30 residential units arranged with 3 access points coming off Aberley Hall Road. The properties are arranged with a proposed layout that faces onto the existing public realm with suds areas and landscaping located throughout the site. So in terms of the principle of development, the application site is located within the defined settlement boundary where there's a presumption in favour of development and the efficient use of land is encouraged. The thrust of both local and national planning policy is to direct new development towards the existing settlements where they can be best served by existing infrastructure and are most accessible via sustainable and public modes of transport. In this instance, the application site is located adjacent to the strategic residential development known as Monmouthshire Bank Sidings that was allocated within the local development plan and where outline planning consent was previously granted via an appeal for up to 575 houses. The land subject of this application is linked to the aforementioned planning appeal via a Section 106 and unilateral undertaking, offering the land to be used for employment purposes, subject to a number of clauses, including the need to market the land for employment purposes. Previously, in 2018, agents acting for the owners of the land provided a report on the marketing process and disposal strategy to the local planning authority. This confirms that marketing commenced in 2014 for B1 uses only. The report confirms no sustainable market for a B1 use on the site and recommends that other uses be explored. By that time, the 2-year marketing period required by the unilateral undertaking had expired, and the purpose of the report was to engage with the Council to discuss other potential uses. In 2020, an application for a food store was submitted on the larger of the 2 areas. Whilst this application was refused, the officer report confirms the marketing exercise found that there was no interest in the application site for a B1 use, the requirements of the legal agreement were discharged, and it's now for the Council to consider other uses for the site. Therefore, on the basis of the above, the local planning authority are satisfied that the inquiry site is previously developed land, the requirements of the legal agreements have been met, and the land can be considered for residential development. As previously stated, the outline consent for the development known as Monmouthshire Bank Sidings was granted for up to 575 houses. The already completed development consists of 517 residential units. Therefore, the proposed developments seeking consent for an additional 42 is still within the total numbers approved via the original outline planning consent. The proposed use for residential development within the defined urban boundary and in a sustainable location adjacent to existing residential uses raises no objection. The proposal accords with the requirements of the original outline consent and legal agreements that this land is subject to. The land meets the definition of previously developed land, and the proposal is compatible with the adjoining uses. Accordingly, it's considered that the principle of the development is acceptable. Sorry. Bear with me just a second, I've lost my place. In terms of further assessment, the main considerations following the principle of the development being accepted are the impact on ecology, highway safety, residential amenity. With regards to ecology, both parcels of the application site have been surveyed and have been surveyed, and the baseline for ecological and biodiversity value have been assessed within the supporting preliminary ecological assessment. This provides information outlining that the existing baseline ecology value of the site and comparing it against the value that could be achieved via the planning application through the landscape, planting and other ecological enhancement features. The preliminary ecological assessment found that there was no evidence of the site being used by a European protected species and did not recommend any further survey works in relation to European protected species. A further survey was recommended and carried out in relation to reptiles on the site, given the existing ground conditions. However, no reptiles were found within the further survey works. Natural Resources Wales have been consulted on this application, and whilst they've raised some concerns, they are satisfied that these can be overcome via the installation of planning conditions. The condition recommended relates to the potential land contamination of the site, and no concern is raised in terms of flood risk or other ecological features present within the site. Turning to highway safety, the application sites are separated by Monmouthshire Castle Drive, which provide access to and from the site across the railway line into the wider highway network, and also links onto Docks Way. The local highways authority have been consulted on this application and are satisfied that the existing highway network has capacity to absorb any uplift in vehicular movements without resulting in an unacceptable adverse impact upon highway or pedestrian safety. The proposed layout has been designed to an adoptable standard, utilising the existing road network where applicable, that serves the existing Monbank development, with the supporting transport survey demonstrating that vehicular and pedestrian movements will be acceptable within the site, taking account for a level of on-street parking. Additionally, the proposed layout has been designed in accordance with the adopted guidance of the Council in respect of servicing and refuse collection. Accordingly, no concern or objection is raised in this respect. The application is also supported by a refuse collection plan which outlines how the site will be serviced. The proposed parking provision of 1 space per residential unit plus visitor parking does fall below the adopted guidance. However, given the highly sustainable location of the application site, with local amenities within walking distance, access and proximity to active travel routes and public transport, is considered that the reduction in parking provision on site is justified and accords with the requirements of Future Wales and Planning Policy Wales. Furthermore, as the proposal seeks a tenure of 100% affordable housing, where car ownership is known to be less, this further adds to the justification for lower levels of off-street parking. Additionally, each property is proposed with a shed and / storage area within the rear garden for cycle storage, which further adds to the sustainable credentials of this scheme. Turning to the considerations of residential amenity. So this falls into 2 factors, 1 for the future occupiers of the development and 2 for the existing occupiers of the existing residential development. So the development of the site for residential purposes in comparison to the existing use and arrangement will inevitably have an impact upon residential amenity of those living close to the site. However, based on the layout and hard and soft landscaping plan submitted in association with the orientation of the site relative to the adjacent residential development, it's considered that there would be no unacceptable impact upon the living condition of neighbouring occupiers. Distances between existing and proposed houses would be sufficient as not to have any unacceptable impact upon privacy, loss of light, or for them to be significantly overbearing. It is, however, considered necessary to restrict permitted development rights to ensure that any future development or alterations to dwellings do not result in any unacceptable impact on the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers. With regards to the living conditions of future residents, the plans detail that each dwelling would benefit from an area of private enclosed amenity space of a sufficient scale as to accord with the Council's adopted guidance. It's noted that the railway runs relatively close to the application site, and in order to mitigate any impact in this respect, acoustic fencing is proposed at the rear boundary of a number of plots. Additionally, the Council's Environmental Health Department has been consulted on this application and raises no objections, subject to additional conditions in respect of noise and vibration impact. When considering the visual impact and design of the house types proposed, it's considered that the design as proposed is appropriate within the context of the existing housing development. The layout is proposed to be outward facing where possible, as to create attractive frontages and natural surveillance with a mix of exterior material finishes to provide visual interest. The use of hard and soft landscaping throughout the development is sensitively designed as to integrate the proposal with the existing built form. It will, however, be necessary to secure details and samples of the external finishes and details of hard and soft landscaping, which will be conditioned for the applicant to submit at a later date. The details of proposed boundary enclosures has been submitted, which includes clothes-board fencing to enclose the majority of private rear amenity spaces, whereas masonry walls are proposed for the boundaries facing the public realm. It's considered that this boundary treatment scheme is acceptable for the development, and the proposed materials relate well to their position and function within the development. It's considered that the proposed layout, scale and appearance of the proposal will not have a detrimental impact on the character and appearance of the area, and it's considered that the proposal meets the stated aims of the allocation for the site and is considered to be an acceptable form of development. The applicant has provided details in terms of a flood risk assessment. However, due to the revision of the flood maps, the site is now outside of any designated area of flooding. However, the flooding consequence assessment did outline that the details were acceptable and any impact would not be of an unacceptable impact either on or off site. In respect of the public consultation, there were a number of objections raised in response to the proposal, raising a number of points which I've sort of summarised within the report. Taking these into the main themes. So firstly, the tenure of housing as they're all affordable. Now, in this respect, there is no limit, upper limit on the number of affordable housing units to be provided through the development, and equally nor should an assumption be made regarding the character of a person or people that live within affordable housing. Such concerns fall out the remit of the planning authority and therefore are given limited weight. There have been concerns with regards to overdevelopment. However, given that the site is within a sustainable location and accords with the original total numbers as approved by the outline consent, this view is not shared by the local planning authority. Lack of parking has been raised as an issue. With that, it is acknowledged that we are recommending this for approval with a lower level of car parking than is adopted by our standards. However, this has been considered. Weight has been given to the sustainable location of the application site, the tenure of the occupiers, and the local highways authority are satisfied that there is a sufficient level of parking in conjunction with the parking that could be achieved either on street or in the visitor accommodation, as to not result in any highway safety issues or conflicts. In respect of concerns raised over loss of open space, so this land does consist of brownfield and previously developed land that, whilst that was given for development purposes through the original consent. Therefore, we do not consider this to be a loss of open space. This, as previously stated, this land was earmarked for development of some description, originally employment, which it was deemed there was no suitable appetite for or market for. The retail store was refused, and therefore now we are considering it for residential, which seems to be, in the view of the local planning authority, an appropriate use. And then there's an adverse impact upon ecology and biodiversity. Now, the application site has been surveyed, and the local planning authority are satisfied that we can achieve a net benefit for biodiversity through the proposed scheme. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval, and these issues have been given, these objections have been given limited weight given the proposed development. So for some additional context with the proposed application, originally when it was advertised, there was an internal error in terms of our mapping system, where we'd had the development within the apêl ward. This was revised a number of years ago, however our maps were not. So this application site falls within the Stow Hill ward. It was annexed into that ward a number of years ago. When the application was originally advertised, consultation letters were sent to the Pale representatives and not those of Stow Hill. That then resulted in the application being pulled from last month's committee, and so we could reissue consultation with the current ward members. We also undertook additional consultation with some of the relevant consultees whose comments were based on the site being located within the Pale ward. The primary focus of this was the Gwent Police. Now, they were reconsulted, however, have not provided any additional comments based on the change to the boundary. As I've stated, the proposal seeks consent for 42 dwellings, all to be affordable. This, in order to maintain the tenure, consent would be subject to a Section 106 agreement that would limit each property as affordable housing. So, I suppose, to summarise, the application site is for a residential development on the fringe of an existing residential development within the defined settlement boundary. The local planning authority are satisfied that the principle of the development is acceptable. There's been no unacceptable adverse impact demonstrated through either ecology, impact upon the existing residents, or upon highway safety, and therefore the proposal is recommended for approval subject to that Section 106 agreement. Just to take some time to talk through some of the slides here. So again, we've got sites 1 and 2, site 1 being the larger. This is just to give some context in terms of the scale of the proposal and in context of the existing residential development. You can see the layout here. So you've got the flats and semi-detached properties on the lower, smaller section, and the remaining 30 dwellings on the upper, larger section. And just to give an indication in terms of layout, parking, the separation distances, and you'll see the number of the area of open space proposed additionally. And then this is the layout then proposed for the larger section. So you'll note the separation distances, setting the development back from some existing areas of planting. There's additional planting proposed within those areas as enhancements. We have an outward-facing development that addresses the public realm. Our SUDS features are well integrated into the proposal. This section shows the smaller sort of site that's further to the south, and just to show the extent of the drop-off that runs to the back, so the railway line is essentially at a significantly lower level, as is the cycle path. Just some indicative street scene elevations, just to give an idea. So this area, demarcated with the red, is the Monmouth Castle Drive. And then these are taken from the larger site. And just some, again, some indicative, some elevations to illustrate the proposed design. And then we just have some photos. So this is the smaller of the two sites that's most recently been used as the railway sidings. And this one, again, it's difficult to get good photos that show the site within context, but you'll note the large areas of hard standing, and the majority of the vegetation is at the boundaries. And then this is the larger of the two, which is a larger grassed area. And you'll note the sort of the periphery is the existing residential development. But yeah, so that's essentially that's the proposal, and the local planning authority recommend it for approval subject to conditions and subject to a Section 106 to ensure that the tenure remains as affordable housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adam. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members, for allowing me to speak today, and officers. Yes, this has been obviously knocking around for some time, and I was involved in the consultation with the public, which was held in Bellevue Park, and I think it might be a couple of years ago now. People who are living in the area were concerned about this. I think primarily about what the site was going to be used for, and I think there's been some amendments made to the design of the properties and how many people would be accommodated. I know that my comments are recorded in the report anyway, but I just wanted to basically summarise the things that which were of concern to me and of concern to residents in my area. And the first one was actually about who was going to live there. Now, I'm very aware that the Planning Committee cannot specify and don't have any sort of professional interest in the people who are going to be living in the properties, which we are asked to consider as councillors. But when I asked Monmouthshire Housing how, what the designs were going to be, what size these units were going to be, they said it would be entirely dependent on what the council wanted. And obviously, as a councillor with a city centre ward, I'm very aware the greatest demand is for young single males. And it's quite a long way out of town, unless people want to hang around Tesco's at night. I don't think there's a lot for that demographic to do in the area. So I was actually quite pleased to see that this is reduced. And I've also taken opportunities to raise the fact that older people become single as well, and they have issues where they would need to move, and maybe, we consider perhaps a bit more widely through the housing process. How the people who occupy that. So that was the main one. Now the other one, Adam, I'm wondering if we can go back to the page with the site on of the larger area. People, if they remember the map that came up there, there's two bends in the road. The first one is actually a blind corner. It's a 90-degree turn. Can we make it a bit bigger? The first one is a 90-degree turn, and how cars do park, because some of the drives are actually tandem drives. People may put their car on the road as well, and visitors put their cars on the road there. So you quite often go around that bend and you're met by oncoming traffic. Now the second bend, which goes the other way, that one's used as a turning space because there is no turning, no sustainable turning point further on down Abley Hall Road. So vehicles come back and they use that second bend to turn in. So my argument there is actually about the safety of the road. Now, it's the most popular walking area in the whole estate because just a bit further along, you'll see where the design for the new houses blanks out. That there is the end of the land which is proposed to be used. That's actually a sort of recreation area. It doesn't have play facilities, but the kids go down there. It's well planted, and kids go down there and knock balls around, and they walk down there. And people use the whole area, including the footpath around, as a dog walking area. And that morning and evening, a lot of people take their dogs and they walk around Abley Hall Road and do a sort of circuit of the whole thing. So there's a lot of footfall going down there. There's obviously also residents as their visitors, but there is an awful lot of delivery vans. A lot of deliveries are made. I think it's, I think there are probably more people than used to work from home, but they still have deliveries. I observe this all the time. So it's the safety of those roads when you've got effectively three roads are going to entrance and exit onto Abley Hall Road. There's one on the first straight bit, which I don't think can be claimed to be causing much of a safety issue or a problem. But the one in the middle, which is actually not very clear as an exit road, it's marked in brown. It's right in the middle of the proposed one there. I think I can see the arrow going backwards and forwards. I can see that one being a problem. And then the one further round, there is more visibility on that bit, but what you have got is you've got people walking down there. You know, you've got quite a lot of pedestrians and things like that. So I wanted to draw attention to that. And then the final substantive point I wanted to make was about the environmental impact. It's not actually clear on those photographs. I don't know when the photographs were taken. Possibly the last one was possibly more recently, but it's of the clearer piece of land. The far end of the land which is being proposed, which is the bulk of that development there, that's actually really sprouted up. And it's, if you think about it, it's had about 15 years to move on. And it's, I thought of a term for this, it's post-industrial ecology has developed all on its own, and it's got a lot of trees and things there. Now, there's quite a lot of wildlife in the area as well. There's hedgehogs, which I've had assurances this morning. Mr. Foote was able to find reference in a more recent environmental consideration that they're going to put a hedgehog highway thing so that hedgehogs can get through into different people's gardens and move across there, because they're definitely out there at the moment. Was something which was actually said about no protected species. Now, we've got bats in the area. Now, I don't know where they roost, but they're roosting somewhere around there. And then there's been no mention of those, so I find that a bit worrying. I'll leave it with you, because if it isn't mentioned, I'm drawing attention to the fact it's not mentioned. And there is a lot of birds, and there's a lot of diversity of plants which has grown up. Now, I know that this isn't, we do need that housing. I'm very aware of that. It's very rarely that type of land would come up for development and be available. And I'm not against the development. I think we've got to be realistic about this. It's going to be used for something. It's probably preferable to the first proposal, which was employment, an area where employment would be created, which may have meant that we had units, warehouses, factories. It could be anything, really, I suppose, within that context. I'm pleased. I think most people on the estate will be pleased that that's not going forward. A lot of people are pleased that there isn't going to be a supermarket there. We've actually, we're well catered for in that area by Tesco's. Lidl is just a bit further down the road. So, I see this as being a practical solution and probably the preferable use for the land. Although, of course, most people will notice there'll be a difference. There'll be some disruption in the area. Now, it also should be, but I need to comment on this because the number of times I've had to discuss it with the police, you wouldn't believe, but there are traffic issues going down Monmouth Castle Drive. There's considerably more traffic than there used to be, and unfortunately, Redrow appear to have made some unsustainable promises or undertakings when the road was developed that it actually wouldn't be a through road. And it clearly is a through road, and I think anybody thinking about it logically would think it would never be anything other than a through road. But we've had a couple of surveys done down there. There is speeding that goes down. There are speed humps, and in a way they've perhaps caused their own problems because we get skips going down there. And when the skips are empty, and of course the vehicles are a bit lighter, they shouldn't be using it anyway because there's a 7.5 tonne limit. But they seem to take, allegedly, delight in bumping over the speed humps. And I've sent evidence of people's ring doorbells recording the noise as they bang over the speed humps. So it isn't without problems. I've got a resident down the bottom who's absolutely insisting that I demand a crossing there, which I can't do. Obviously, it'll be Rent Smart Wales who make these recommendations, but we do have issues with the safety on that road, and it's obviously more people living in the area. But I hope that through the conditions which are put on the application, some of these perhaps more difficult issues may be addressed. It's a bit. There's more trees. I never know actually how to read these plans. Is this when they propose the trees? Is that what we're going to get, or is that just Yeah, I'd like to see a few more trees on site too, I think, because it's not balanced. With site 1, I've got trees down the side, and site 2 is a bit more open. So thank you very much for giving me the time to listen and bearing with me.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, we open it up to members. Councillor Perkins.
So, as Councillor Thomas has mentioned, that road on there that's marked in brown. Now, the other two there, you can see vehicles being able to turn. In that one where it's marked, how do the refuse lorries access into those properties then? Because that doesn't look wide enough with turning.
So, yes, you're absolutely correct. So the middle section, so the brown bit, would be a private driveway. So the intention would not be for lorries to access or bin refuse vehicles to access that. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but just here, can you see that on the screen? That is a sort of a bin refuse area that residents would be able to avail of, put their bins there. The operatives would then collect them from that location, and that's how that would be intended to operate for the private drive. So that would cover the 3 properties that are here potentially 4 if this one avails of it, but it's a limited number of properties that would avail of that. Yes, you are correct. The refuse areas vehicles would not intend to go into that. So that's why this area has been designed intentionally to address that issue, so that we don't have bins therefore then left on the curb or on the side of the street.
Councillor Cox.
I appreciate a little explanation. I'm afraid I don't understand what we're talking about when we say a private drive. That I'm assuming the other 2 accesses are going to be adopted by the highway. And so if that's a private drive, who's responsible for the maintenance of it?
So yes, you're correct. The other elements of highway have been designed to an adoptable standard, and the intention would be that they would be adopted by the local by the local authority, whereas that area is not to an adoptable standard, therefore would not be adopted and would be at the maintenance requirements of the owners of the land. So in this case, it is Monmouthshire Housing Association.
Councillor Watkins.
2 things, Chair. One is the development which backs onto the railway line. What sort of boundary is going there, and is it sufficient to possibly stop any noise being affecting the housing?
Yes, so we have acoustic fencing proposed at the rear of those boundaries, and then if I can also just draw your attention to this site plan. So we also have, not only is there acoustic fencing proposed at the rear, but there's a significant level change, which again helps with regards to the sort of noise spread. But yeah, we do have acoustic fencing proposed at the rear of those properties to protect the sort of living conditions of any future occupiers.
Chair, do we know the height of that compared with the houses? There's no point in having a 2-metre fence when we've got a bank, lower than 3 metres, that it doesn't take any effect.
I believe it is a 2-metre high acoustic fence that runs to the rear of those.
Chair, but we've got a sloping bank away from that, so surely the acoustic fence needs to be higher than that, level with at least the top of the ground floor of the property.
So the railway line's at a lower level. So then you have the intervening banking, and then you would have the acoustic fencing. So that has been the comments that I've received from our environmental health officers is that that should be sufficient. There are some additional conditions suggested. However, they are satisfied that the relationship there and the proposed acoustic fencing in terms of its location and height would be sufficient to avoid any adverse impact in terms of the noise from the railway.
Okay, just for clarification then, Chair, that the fence is on the top of the bank and not the bottom.
Yes, sorry.
Okay. The other question, Chair, is 106 agreement. Is there anything or contribution for education at all?
No, not in this instance. So because the proposal is for 100% affordable housing, there's no additional contributions being sought.
Sorry, Councillor, I should clarify. We've recently been out to consultation in regards to this, so that policy might be changing, but that is the current position, correct at this juncture.
Okay. One further question in regards to affordable housing. How much affordable housing is in the current development? Do we know?
I don't know. I don't know what the requirements were from the current Monbank application that would be contained within that section 106, and I don't know offhand. Our planning contributions manager has just raised their hand. Perhaps they might have the answer. Chair, am I okay to?
Yes, Chair, carry on.
Alan, did you want to come in and answer that?
Yeah, if I could just touch on that. Just to say that within the site at the moment, 9% of the site was, I don't have the exact figures of numbers of units, but 9% of the development was for affordable.
Yep, you too.
Can I have a further comment then, please, Chair? What is the policy of NCC in regards to affordable housing on developments, especially development in this total site? You know, is it 23% or 30% or what?
I don't know offhand. I would need to check that. Again, I don't know whether Alan can come in and answer that. I'm sorry, I don't have that offhand. Alan, can you answer?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, the site's currently in from a policy perspective, it's in a 30% area. But at the time of this particular application, there were viability issues, and that was the reason that the eventual figure ended up at 9%.
Thank you. Councillor Rheoli, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want clarification from the officer. You mentioned during the presentation that we were going to compromise our standards on parking due to the fact, and correct me if I'm wrong, due to the fact that social housing doesn't attract so many people with cars, I expect. Is that correct? Did I hear you correct?
Yes, you did hear me correct, but what I would say is that there's a number of factors. So it's not just the tenure, that is one factor. Additionally, we are considering it, due to its proximity to active travel links, public transport links, public transport availability, and its highly sustainable location. So there are a number of factors that we've considered, and essentially consider that the reduction in off-street parking is justified in this location. But you are correct, you did hear me correctly, but it's not solely that issue.
Again, I don't think that, I'm fully aware of the travel links and get on your bike theories and and jog on to the nearest town centre. The reality is, given the fact that lots of employment opportunities are now just on the verges outside of the city, even our poor old people in social housing will probably have to get a car these days. And I just think that to compromise that, I'm not against the application, but I just think we need to be honest. So we have houses and we have homes that we need going there. And I listened intently to the council member, Kate, as she put the case forward. I'm just worried that are we making too many compromises with regards to parking? Because if anything, car ownership is going up. It's not going down for anybody, anyone at all. Just an observation, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't have any more hands up, no speakers at the moment. So, could we move now? Sorry? Oh, Councillor Perkins.
Another point that Councillor Thomas raised about bats. Now, while I understand that they're most probably roosting in the train tunnels and stuff, is there any way to put a condition for bat boxes?
So, in respect of the survey works that were undertaken, there was no evidence of bats found on site. So, again, they may be within that area. Bear with me one moment. What I could potentially do. As part of the ecological sort of enhancement scheme, bird and bat boxes are proposed as part of the scheme. So whilst they haven't been identified on site, and we don't need to, there's not a roost or anything present on site, these considerations have been made and do form part of the wider ecological enhancement scheme that is proposed. So I hope that's, okay, great.
Councillor Hales.
I can just probably help on the bats whilst declaring interest, because I'm responsible for the development, which is over the other side of the road on the old Whitehead Steelworks, and there was a bat roost constructed there as part of the development, pretty close to this development on the other side of the roundabout, which has significant bat activity, so I suspect that they're coming from there in the road. Yeah. It's housed there in we had to construct a specific sort of purpose-built bat roost. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Councillor Clark.
The diagram indicates that there are various areas of grass or vegetation of different types for different sort of purposes. Because I just was interested in the maintenance of it. My experience becomes quite a controversial issue, the patches of grass on housing developments, and particularly when they're not very well maintained. So what is the provision for those being maintained? And is that written into the, is that a condition of the planning agreement that those are taken on board?
So those sort of issues are when the maintenance, management, ownership are passed to residents. In this instance, that would be maintained by Monmouthshire Housing Association, who would be responsible for the maintenance and upkeep. So that isn't sort of prevalent in this case.
Okay, thank you. Don't see any hands. Could we now move to the vote on the officer's recommendation to grant this application? Could I show of hands?
Is there a proposer?
Yeah. Do we have a proposer for the application? Yes, Councillor Perkins. A seconder? Councillor Howells. All those in favour of the application, put your hands. It's carried. Unanimous. Thank you very much, all. Moving on to the final application, which is 25/0471. This is the Unit 10 to 11 Port Road Mixed Glass in Retail Park in Newport. And again, the presenting officer is Adam Foote, Principal Planning Officer.
Thank you, Chair. Again, this application is reported to Planning Committee for consideration because it consists of major development. The site is Units 10 to 11 Port Road on the Maysglass Retail Park. So the application site comprises of a large building with a commercial and industrial appearance occupying in an irregularly shaped plot on the north side of Port Road. The application is located within the defined settlement boundary. And the immediate area has a prevailing industrial and commercial character consisting of large utilitarian designed buildings set back from the highway with parking arranged forward of their principal elevations and servicing at the rear. The railway line runs to the rear of the application site, separating it from the residential development to the north. So the building subject of this application is constructed of brick at ground floor level and metal clad above. The design of the building has a simple utilitarian design, which you'll see from this slide shown, with two gable ends on its front elevation and a central valley roof design. The site is enclosed with palisade fencing and parking provision provided between the principal elevation and the highway. Service delivery road runs along the eastern boundary of the site with a separate gated access leading to the service area at the rear. So this application seeks consent for the construction of an extension to the existing building. The application proposes additional storage purposes only. The current use of the site is as a wholesale carpet distribution warehouse. So whilst the proposal would enable the existing function, there's no additional retail space proposed. The extension is proposed to be constructed on the rear of the building, however would project to the side and east of the existing building. The extension is proposed with a maximum footprint of 22.5 metres by 85.3 metres, with the projection beyond the existing side elevation measuring 22.8 metres. The extension is proposed with a height to eaves of 10.1 metres and a ridge height of 12.2 metres. Again, the extension's design has a simple utilitarian form, which we expect for a development of this nature, and particularly within this context. The external appearance of the extension in terms of its finish is proposed to match the upper element of the existing building. So with regards to the sort of considerations of the application, primarily in terms of the principle, the main consideration is that it's within the defined settlement boundary, it's within a sustainable location, and it would facilitate the expansion of an existing business within this location. In order to ensure that there's no conflict with any retail policies, we are suggesting a condition that limits the use to be ancillary storage, operational space only, and for it to be no additional retail space. With regards to the proposed highway safety element of the proposal, the existing access point would be unchanged. The internal configuration would be amended insofar as the extension would occupy the existing service yard. So the servicing yard is proposed to be moved, and you'll note from the if you look at the third image down on the screen, You'll note the proposed access points for HGVs in that location. The parking provision would be maintained at the front of the property, and given that the proposal would result in an uplift in the economic opportunities of the site opposed to additional retail floor space, any uplift in terms of visitors to and from the site is considered to be very low, and however it would provide the opportunity for additional staff. The local highways authority have been consulted and they're satisfied that the proposed arrangement is acceptable, and also that the parking provision is suitable to meet the any increase in demand there. Again, the existing access point would be unchanged, so we're satisfied in that regard. With regards to ecology and biodiversity, the application site is primarily a hard-surfaced site within a commercial industrial setting. It has limited ecological value. There is a bank of trees that runs along the rear boundary, separating the site from the railway line. There would be a loss of a tree with regards to a loss of a tree to facilitate the proposed development. So as part of the proposal, we have a scheme proposing 12 trees. This would compensate for the loss of the tree and provide an ecological enhancement. We're satisfied that that's sufficient to support the development and meet the requirements of Planning Policy Wales. With regards to residential amenity, this proposal would result in the built form being closer to the residential properties on the residential site to the rear. However, these are separated by the railway line, the intervening topography and planting, and there would still be in excess of 40 metres between the rear of the extension and the closest residential property. We consider that that is sufficient as to ensure that there would be no adverse impacts in respect of the living conditions of neighbouring occupiers. Also, there's no windows or light features proposed on the rear of the building that would cause any disruption or nuisance to the closest occupiers. With regards to issues raised through consultations, Natural Resources Wales have been consulted. They have not objected to the application. However, they do recommend conditions in relation to contaminated land, seeking further information in regards to means of construction, such as foundations, methodology prior to the commencement of development. Again, we're satisfied that these are sufficient as to support the proposal. Again, the application has been accompanied by a flood consequence assessment, and similarly to the last application, the revision of the flood maps, it now takes this application outside of any defined area of flood risk. However, it's just for members' information that the proposal was demonstrated not to have any unacceptable impact in regards of flooding or flood risk on or off sites in any case. So again, in respect of the proposal, I'd take you through some of the slides. I mean, what we have here is the current existing footprint and layout. So you'll note that the we have the sort of sales area which forms this L shape here, and this is the existing storage area. Essentially, the applicants have stated that the current storage area is not sufficient, and it's limiting their economic activity, and therefore that's the justification of why the proposal is being sought. This is the proposed layout, so you'll note obviously this is the existing, this is the extension proposed that runs along the rear and projects to the side, and then this is the proposed new loading bay. Here are the existing elevations, and these are the proposed. You will note that there are the other than the extension, the other visual change is the addition of 3 windows within the front elevation. Again, we're satisfied with this. That would be, you'll note that there's an office space proposed along the front area here. This is existing, and they're proposing to insert a mezzanine for some additional office space above, and those windows would simply serve that office space. And then here we just have some photos of the site as present. But yes, the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions, and primarily the key condition is the one limiting the use of the additional floor space so that it doesn't be used for additional sales areas and conflict with the requirements of either our retail policies or the those found within national planning policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adam. Over to the committee. Any questions? No? Don't see any hands. Okay, moving on then. Could we have a proposal to accept the officer's recommendations to grant? Councillor Howells. Could we have a seconder? Okay. Councillor Perkins. Okay, that is granted. Oh, sorry, yeah, the vote. All in favour? It's rushing. Okay, that's it. Yeah. Councillor Rheoli, your hand up?
Yes, my hand is up.
Okay, then. All right, that's unanimous then. Carried.
Okay.
Thank you very much. That's it, is it? Yes. Yeah.
Chairman, can I've got to switch over to something else. Chairman, on the appeals, are we at that point now? The appeals update.
Yeah, we are, Councillor.
Thank you very much indeed. On the appeals update, I noticed that the Webber's appeal down in Bishton, that was a very difficult appeal. In so much that what I'm getting to, I'm sorry for. I just had to switch over instruments quick otherwise I would have been long dead. But if you look at the rural and semi-rural existence within Newport, 70% of our land within Newport is rural land, or semi-rural land as well. So a lot of our applications are going to come in from our farming communities who are actually being encouraged by the Welsh Government to diversify as much as they can. And they're finding it difficult when they come up with regards to understanding the criteria that are being placed before them by the planning officers. And so we have a situation where we have farmers who are trying to survive and diversify, the public who get confused themselves, planning officers who are trying to implement and look after the protection of everyone, and local members who are stuck in the middle of all this. We're only going to get more applications for diversification from our farming community. And we have to find a way to make planning work and make planning easier. Castle Farm, in effect, won their appeal. And I'm glad that there was a rationale brought to that appeal on the enforcement. And I'm glad that rationale came in the end. But is there a way that we as planning members and the farming community and the public at large, is there some way that the planning officers could open up, I don't know, a seminar, a sit down with the farming community, even if it's the farming community Wales, the NUF, where we can really sit down and look at how we can assist our farming community to diversify, and how we can make planning work going forward in the future for all of us, Chair. So I don't expect the answer now, but I wonder if Mr. Ferguson could think on about that and maybe write to me.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm sure.
Yeah, Councillor, I will. Yeah, I will respond to you in due course. I'll have to give it some thought with the team and get back to you. Just in terms of that, just in terms of that one appeal decision, though, it is useful to note we did recommend they submit an application, and they wouldn't. Hence why we had to take enforcement action, and we actually sought to under-enforce. So, as I said, it's vindication of our position from my perspective, and I know the team are working hard to get an application in. But, as I said, yeah, I will happily come back to you on the issue raised. Thank you.
It's not a criticism of yourself or your team. It's, I would say, on this issue, and we worked hard on this issue. There was, there's a communication issue within the farming community with the planners, with the public, and it's getting everybody to understand the planning is here to support and to encourage the diversification that we need. And that's, we're going to have to sit down somehow and overcome this, because we are surrounding 70% of the land within your planning area is green. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I think that will end today's meeting. I thank you very much for your attendance, and we'll see you at the next meeting.